Alright, let's see if my roommate can not interrupt me this time. Hello, fellow writers. So my 3-page portion of my paper that I really like is mostly my stage 1 draft, the story. I think it's the most well developed. I think it grabs the attention of the audience the best out of any of the other parts. And it really hits close to home emotionally. I think especially because a friend is involved, that kind of thing. It's a very I don't really know how to describe it, so I'll just read it. The world is full of mountains. They litter maps with their peaks and inclines. They are absolutely massive, and they do not move. Most important of all is that despite their abundance and seemingly uneventful nature, they have intrigued every form of humankind in history. Hundreds upon hundreds of metaphors use mountains as reference points. Some of the most incredible stories we tell are accounts of climbing a mountain. We have become obsessed with the idea of getting to the top, no matter how hard, deadly, or dumb it may be to accomplish that task. Why do mountains have this identity? Why do we care? Why do we climb mountains? Early in my college career, I met a friend named Caleb Madison. I was playing ping pong on the first floor of my dormitory when Caleb's drunk roommate broke the table in anger that he couldn't play ping pong himself. Caleb calmed him down in the voice of a therapist, explaining that he had to wait his turn. I thought this was rather hilarious, as this man was about 19 and did not need to be told to wait his turn. Nonetheless, Caleb was extremely patient with his roommate and eventually led him off to bed. When Caleb came back, I explained to him that I was intrigued by his patience. All he said was, "People are fun." Caleb is a tall and scrawny young man with the build of a runner. He drinks tea at least twice a day and wears sweaters that are scratchy like the stubble of a beard. His smile is utterly contagious, as well as his love for the world, whether it be authentic or not. But above all, Caleb is one heck of an adventurer. In his spare time, Caleb runs to stay in shape. A couple weeks after I met him, I vividly remember passing him at the end of his run. He yelled to me that he had run at the speed of his fastest mile for 7 miles. Essentially, this means he sprinted 7 miles. I spent the rest of the day thinking about how this was even possible, never mind a pastime for Caleb. I later learned from him that his larger intentions are to climb every 14er in Colorado, another feat I barely thought possible. Ever since coming to college, I had been obsessed with 14ers. These are mountains that are above 14,000 feet and can be radically difficult to climb without help or experience. Being an inexperienced person myself, I was quite aware that I couldn't climb one alone. So when Caleb showed me his list of unclimbed 14ers, I asked excitedly if we could climb one together. Caleb agreed to lead me to the top of a mountain called Long's Peak, which is situated about 1 hour from Boulder, Colorado, buried in the Rockies. For most of the year, there is so much snow on Long's Peak that it disguises itself in the clouds. It is indistinguishable along the horizon. This much snow demands an expertise in climbing that I am still far from possessing. However, toward the end of July, when every last bit of snow is melted, the summit of Long Peak darkens, towering over its neighbors and clearly visible at a distance. The summit is well beyond the altitude where trees can grow, allowing for Long's Peak to appear as one seamless and unmovable rock. Let me just scroll down to where stage 1 continues. It was early October when Caleb and I found ourselves itching to be on top of the world. The beginnings of winter were already setting in, the trees turning bare and the sky turning gray. Caleb and I filled his truck with extra clothing, small amounts of food, sources of light, his ice axe, and several water bottles full of boiling water. He told me that the temperature would easily be cold enough to freeze our source of water, so it was important to ensure that said water was quite hot at the beginning of the trip. Caleb has a funny way of doing things just weirdly enough so that people will ask about it, and he can explain with his signature smile. He did this practice many times while filling the water bottles with boiling water. Before long, we departed for the mountain. We drove straight into the sunset and into the mountains. The plan was to sleep in his truck. We would bundle, eat a small dinner, and attempt to rest until our departure on the trailhead, which was set for 2 a.m. We would summit Long's Peak by 11 a.m., avoid the inevitable storms that came in late afternoon. And avoid the inevitable storms that came in the late afternoon. We would walk down in a timely manner and gossip about the experience on the way home. The events that prevailed were much different. Our drive led us to that same dirt road. It was clear that Our drive led us to a dirt road. It was clear that this was the only road for many miles in any direction, as there was no other street to turn onto. We were completely surrounded by an ominous mix of thick forest and walls of granite. Sometimes there would be rocks that had fallen in the middle of the road, causing Caleb to swerve the heavy truck enough to bring my stomach with it. My ears popped from altitude roughly every 5 minutes, which was my only indicator of our location. Night had long fallen, and the only light source was the single headlight that still worked on the truck. Our destination, it turned out, was nothing but a parking lot. Caleb switched off the truck. I quickly longed for the heat that no longer came from the vent. I was sick with a cold at the time. My hurting throat mixed with an elevation of 8,000 feet gave me a moist cough that I would keep with me for the remainder of the trip. I gasped for air quite often, and I kept a mask over my mouth for warmth. My internal body temperature was low, and I felt the repercussions of this upon stepping out of the car for the first time at the base of the mountain. Snow brushed off our winter coats like dust. Our body heat never caused it to melt. The wind welcomed us by blowing snow into our faces and stinging our cheeks like microscopic needles. The snow would remain on our cheeks and eventually freeze. Caleb took a deep breath and an audible sigh as though he were given a pina colada by the beach. That's it.